We're off to a roaring start here on the 2D podcast with you, as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. Eric Eager telling us about his hair care products right before we got started. That's quite a uh, quite a trip that I don't think anybody else needs to hear about. Sumer Sports, sumersports.com. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, 810WHB.com. We have a lot to get to here in the pod. Of course, we want to talk about where the Bills are right now. Von Miller banged up. Does that mean that they're dropping out of the top spot? They finally fell out of the top spot with the odds. Are the Chiefs just the favorite now, odds-wise, or are they actually the better team? Deshaun Watson's back. What can he accomplish with what's left of this year? Jeff Saturday apparently doesn't have a watch. Odell Beckham Jr. fits best where? Is Mike White the real deal? Could the Jets actually be the real deal? Is Russ done cooking in Denver? Are Brady and Aaron not going to be around anymore in the NFL, or at least where they currently are? Dolphins have a 3-game gauntlet. We'll find out who they are coming up very soon. Of course, we'll get to what we are all looking at in week 13. Remember, the 2D podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the entire greater Kansas City area, everywhere from Overland Park, Leawood, Lenexa, Independence, Olathe, Lee Summit, Shawnee, Blue Springs, you name it, they cover it. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear. Poof. It's like magic, whatever it is, small or large. Been doing it since 1994 here in Kansas City. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. You can find them online at gannasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Let's get to it, Jeff. Let's begin with Deshaun Watson. What does his return mean for the NFL, for the Browns, and what can he accomplish here with so little time left in the season?
Well, I think it means that they have to take probably another week to deal with some of the fallout from all that's been happening with him. I mean, we got a break from it for about 3 months here, but yeah, I mean, there are going to be obviously some protesters out there. The women who've been involved in this are supposed to be at the game, so it's going to be controversial. I think, taking on the team that he played with, and had a lot of issues with over the last couple of years. So there's going to be a lot that comes with this, but ultimately what we're talking about now is how he can help this team in the last 6 weeks of the season. I don't see them making much of a move with him at quarterback. Just talking to people around the league and just getting a sense for the time he's been away. You saw what he was in the preseason. They've done a pretty good job of trying to stay close. I think they would love to have a couple more wins, but Jacoby Brissett has done, I think, as much as you could ask of a backup quarterback in the situation. But ultimately, for him to come in and run the table, which is what it would take for them to be a postseason team, I think if they play 500 football with him, I think that's an accomplishment in and of itself. If they get through the PR hit without taking too much shrapnel, I think that would be a positive for them. But ultimately, it's going to be about the drama, and it's going to be about him probably playing at a level that we're not used to him seeing in the last couple of years.
Eric, do you see anything that can really get accomplished here with the time that's left? I mean, I suppose if you're red hot, win out, maybe 10-7 gets you to where you want to go. But is this ultimately just about really setting up what the future is going to be with him, or just weathering, like Jeff said, the storm of what inevitably is coming on the PR side of things?
Yeah, I mean, this is a time period where they have to. I mean, look, this has been a useful first 11 games. I mean, they signed David Njoku to a kind of a head scratching contract at the time. I know I wrote about it for PFF, and he's emerged as a bona fide top 5 tight end in the NFL. That's a good thing, right? They have to learn about, like they've had a really bad run defense. And I think, can they win with Watson and that defense, being kind of that way? Like, can Kevin Stefanski keep his job? I'm imagining like he's safe, but if it goes kaput down the stretch here and they finish, 5-12 or something like that, or 6-11, like that's no guarantee. So I think the thing that they have to accomplish down the stretch is to be competitive and win football games. And I don't think they'll make the playoffs. I think it's too difficult in the AFC. There's too many teams with good records. But they really do have to, I think, show out and be good. And he has to elevate the play of Amari Cooper, who's already had a good season, right? Like, Amari Cooper's been as good as anybody at wide receiver. Donovan Peoples-Jones has to be a guy, or are you going to give him a second contract? Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. Like, there's talent on that team, and Watson has to come in here and enhance it, because to what Jeff said, I think Jacoby Brissett has earned himself $30 million this year, like as a backup quarterback, lifetime contracts in the league. Like, he's going to be the next like Chase Daniel type quarterback who gets the big contracts because of how he performed this year. But if Deshaun Watson comes in and doesn't perform to that standard, it's going to look really bad for Cleveland, right? So like, that's the thing that they have to accomplish here, is he has to exceed by I think margin what Jacoby Brissett did, which is not going to be easy.
Can we expect him to just hit the ground running, Jeff? I mean, you got to knock some rust off, right? Playing in the NFL is something that takes muscle memory. There's all the different things. Like, you can't condition yourself for the resistance of 300-pound men crashing into you, right there. Those little support muscles take it. So there's the physical side, but just the act of throwing the football, throwing it off platform, all that. I mean, how good can a guy be? We've seen Aaron Rodgers come out and stink to start seasons for just missing training camp, and he was at least going through the practices. Like, this could be really ugly, couldn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Look, I remember back when, this is going to go way back. Remember Drew Henson, who was a former Michigan quarterback who played baseball in the Yankees farm system and then went back to the NFL, came into the NFL with the Cowboys, I think it was. And I remember talking to some GMs back then about it. It's like 20 years ago. Like, how long can you realistically be away from football at that position and stay sharp? And 2 years was about the max. And so he's right up against that. And so what they would say is, at that point, you are losing some of your instincts. You are losing some of your feel. Even though he's been in the offseason program, as people have said to me, that does help him. But you're still not going out there and seeing live bullets every week. And you're not going against real competition. It's a whole different story when it's Von Miller, Micah Parsons chasing after you, as opposed to just playing on air in 7-on-7 in an OTA. So I'm not expecting a whole lot, to be honest with you. I think that Jacoby Brissett is probably still right now the better player for what they need, but they're paying Deshaun Watson $230 million. And this really is, I think someone said in the comments, this really is about next year and the year after that. I mean, it's a pipe dream to think he's going to walk in here and have a huge difference at a time when the Ravens and the Bengals are much better teams.
Yeah, and there's a reason they're carrying over $38 million from this year to next year, right? Like, they're not, like, when you look at their cap situation, they're carrying them. They're paying Watson almost nothing this year. And they're carrying over about 30 to 40 million from this year's cap that they're not spending this year to next year. It is all about, but Jeff, interesting question I have, right? I think everybody, like, let's throw the personal thing out of there for a second. Like, Watson in years 1, 2, and 3 was a good, not great quarterback, right? He was kind of quarterback 10, right? Or 8 to 10. Like, he could win some football games. I think about the playoff game against Buffalo where they didn't score any points in the first half, and he kind of willed them back with running and kind of a gritty kind of quarterback. It wasn't until 2020 when he really put up super efficient passing stats and like the stats that made us think that he was a top 5 guy. And that was a year where they went 4-12. They didn't have DeAndre Hopkins, and there was not a whole lot they were playing for, but he played super well. Like, I wonder, does he revert back to the guy that was the first few years in Houston, which was good, like a very good quarterback, but I don't know if he's worth $250 million guaranteed. Like, they're paying for the guy he was in 20, the top 5 quarterback graded guy, and he was like 3rd in WAR, PFF WAR, like wins above replacement. Every other year he was kind of 8 to 10. Like, if they get 8 to 10 for the next 2-3 years, as he's A, acclimating to a new system, and B, maybe not able to capture what he got in that last year under Bill O'Brien, like, does that, I mean, that's rough for Cleveland.
Yeah, let's do this. Where was he? Like, what did you think he was at the peak of his game, right? Like Jeff, like, because I think that, to predict what he's going to be, you got to start with what he was, right? Yeah. And I would think his best days would still lie ahead, because of, quarterback's prime seems to be 28 to 33 these days, right? So there's still good football days unless it goes awry or he can't handle, all the, the focus and there's still going to be protests. There's already a bunch of the victims that are going to be at the game. That's going to be a big point. Unless that rattles him mentally, physically. Just let's say he handles all that. They get beyond all that. What was he? What will he be?
Well, what he was, I'll even go back to his rookie year, and that gets lost in the shuffle because before he tore his knee up, he was on pace for like 40 touchdown passes as a rookie. And so he's shown the ability to be, I'd almost say, a smaller version of Josh Allen. I mean, when he's at his best, he's a guy who can kill you with his arm and his legs and his instincts and his feel and all that stuff. He's a leader. I mean, he's somebody who's won big games in college. He's somebody who's won with a team that was dysfunctional from almost day one, and they traded away his best weapon in DeAndre Hopkins. So I think that is, at his ceiling, he's somebody who can elevate a team. Now, Eric's point is correct. Like, does the time he missed and even the off the field stuff, does that sap him of that ability? Because it's different when you've already accomplished stuff and you walk in the door like Tom Brady. You've got rings and you've got trophies and you know what it takes to win. He's been around enough dysfunction that you do wonder, does he know what normal is? Can he function in an environment where he's being asked to create normality? It's a great question. I don't know. I think that will be, I think about Michael Vick when he lost time in prison. He came to the Philadelphia Eagles where Andy Reid had a system in place, had won. He was a really good coach. He had Donovan McNabb was still there. He had a lot of things in place that allowed him to acclimate that Deshaun Watson does not have. So those are real questions he has to face.
Yeah, in 2020, Deshaun Watson led the NFL in passing yards. He led the NFL by more than half a yard in yards per pass attempt. He was the only two quarterbacks that had better adjusted net yards per attempt, which takes into consideration interceptions and sacks, were Aaron Rodgers, who was the MVP of the league that year, and Patrick Mahomes, who led the Chiefs to 14-2 in the Super Bowl. Like, that is I think that's ceiling for Watson, right? But you look at some of the other years, like 2019, where again he came into Arrowhead and took the Chiefs, to 24-0. You're more looking at a guy who was 12th in an adjusted net yards per attempt, and that where Patrick Mahomes was second that year, right? So that's the range of outcomes for me, and my prediction would be you're going to see the lower end of that for a while, because that Browns offense is not the same offense that Bill O'Brien ran in Houston. It's a under center, two tight ends, run the football a little bit, and play action and stuff. Whereas Houston was much more in the shotgun, feature a wide receiver like Hopkins, and he was better once Hopkins left, interestingly. But I still think like 2020 was what everybody was chasing, but I don't know if that's really reality for him.
A couple of things. One, and watch me pick at this scab, Jeff. Watch where this one goes. I know you've been very big, and you're right. The stats from that year, Eric, are you said leading the league in yards, 4,800 yards. He had 32 touchdowns. He had less than 10 interceptions. It was a fantastic statistical season. Do you remember what their record was?
Oh, I know what the record was. Yeah,
4-12.
Yeah.
I mean, so I am a little curious. Like, you've always had, and listening to your being a fan of your other work and listening to your other podcasts, you've been a fan of the talents. And most people have been, right? Like, everybody would say he's a very good quarterback, one of the best in the NFL. But how do you equate being bullish on him at 4-12 with being as negative as you are about Justin Herbert being 500-ish? Where, like, how would you put those two quarterbacks? Who would be the guy if you
Herbert's better than Watson? Like,
okay,
yeah, I mean, I will say
personal with you and Herbert.
It's not personal. It's not. I just said Herbert's better than Watson, did I not?
You did. I just
but also
enjoy feeding into the narrative.
But also, I mean, I'm gonna throw this out there. Deshaun Watson has 2 division titles and a playoff victory under his belt. But I would say from an arm talent standpoint, like my friend Ethan Young, who's the director of football admin, I think, for UCLA football. Like when they were coming out, he dinged Watson because of lack of arm strength. I do think, like, from a talent standpoint, Watson there's a lot more like of that gutsiness to him, right? The winning against Alabama in the college football playoff, than like there's intangibles there with Watson that, like, pure arm strength, Herbert's got him by a country mile, I would say, right? But, as far as there's a little bit of like winning football games, like the thing is if you win 2 division titles with Bill O'Brien as your coach, you're pretty good, I think, right? But again, there's the 4-12 year where we saw the whole thing fall apart, and then obviously there's the off the field stuff that is inexcusable. So, like I said, I would rather have Herbert right now than him. Moving forward, I don't even think it's really close.
You got a thought on that one, Jeff? I mean, is Watson more kind of Tua? Tua's putting up big numbers now, right?
No, he's not Tua. I mean, I think he's closer to what Justin Herbert is. I mean, I would take.
Well, wait a minute. Now I got to ask. So where's Tua in that mix? Tua's down below both those guys.
Yeah. I mean, he's just smaller. I'm just going off. If I was a GM looking at quarterbacks, and Tua is standing next to Deshaun Watson and Justin Herbert, then Tua is just getting dinged because he's a smaller guy without the arm strength, without the mobility, really. I mean, it's just he's got to be Drew Brees to be a success in this league. And he's being Drew Brees right now, at least Drew Brees light, I mean, with his numbers and his accuracy. But, Deshaun Watson, again, is just I value the winning maybe more so than Eric does. I look at the games he played in college. I do. Again, I give him a little more of a pass having played under Bill O'Brien. I think that affects what you are as a quarterback. I think Patrick Mahomes playing for Andy Reid has been a huge factor in why Patrick Mahomes has been a success. You put him with, name whatever lousy coach, David Culley or whatever, or somebody who's just played 1 year, Nathaniel Hackett. He maybe has a different experience. I just think I think Deshaun Watson was succeeding in spite of what was around him, which I give him a ton of credit for. But yeah, I think that right now Herbert is, in terms of how he's performed, he's done a lot of the same things Watson did at the start of his career and continue to do them and stay out of trouble.
Couple things. You mentioned smaller. What do you think Tua's height and weight is at least listed at? I'm not going to say it is. What do you think Deshaun Watson's height and weight is listed at? Anybody want to take a shot?
Yeah, I think actually Tua's, well, I guess Watson, the point you're trying to make, Petro, is that Watson's smaller than we think.
Yes. Deshaun Watson's listed at 6'2", 215. Tua's listed at 6'1", 217.
Yeah, and there's no way Tua is 6'1". I can tell you that just watching the game.
Probably
I can tell you he's not.
Usually you can and I Tago Vale.
Can you throw me a bone here? This Nick Lammers has a really good point.
Well, I'm not. I don't happen to be looking at that right now. I'm trying to get a height weight. Hang on, let me see. What does Nick say? Herbert's Jay Cutler with a better attitude. That's fair. We also had I'm fine with that. And we had this one up here too from Irish Mac. Jeff Jordan had a hell of an arm, but right, it's not just all arm talent.
What is my guy? By the way, what is my guy? Brad Shanks. Yeah, I like this. I don't like this one. I think that he's just going. And as Chiefs fans, we saw Todd Marijuanovich start a playoff game at Arrowhead, right? But I don't see this connection other than those two being left-handed. Is Brad smoking the good stuff when he makes this comparison? Is he getting his fix from Todd here?
I don't know. You mean Tua is or Brad is?
Brad, Tua's not Tua looks very smart out there, very intelligent. He takes care of the football. He's like the exact opposite of Todd Marinovich.
So I did look up, I Googled, and I would have thought if I were his agent, I wouldn't have let him measure into the combine, but he did. And this says he came in at 6 foot. I'm looking to see, was it 5'11" and 6'8" or 7'8" or something, or where it was, but I've seen a couple of things that put him at 6 foot. So we'll call
Tua, you talking about?
But yeah, Tua. We'll call Tua 6 foot.
Yeah, I mean,
that's Drew Brees size, right?
And he's probably like 5'11". Yeah, he's probably 5.
No. That's at the combine. They actually measure him.
What's Russell Wilson listed as?
Russell Wilson at the combine, I remember, came in at 5'10 and a half.
Okay.
I'm looking up just to see if they're fudging what Deshaun Watson came in at the combine, just because it's at least apples to apples. Always like to look at a couple of different things. That looks like he came in at 6'2" even. So yeah, I mean, maybe 6'2.5". Here's one that has him at 6'2.5". So Watson's definitely taller. But my point is, I don't think I don't think there's a whole lot of difference in them size wise between those two. So I think there's something to it. We'll see who ends up being better. I'm obviously more bullish on Tua. Have been all along than most people are. I ding Deshaun Watson for the lack of winning in the NFL. And I think they're you said, well, why isn't he lifting up this team? You'd be like, well, the Texans organization's terrible. Okay, I'll buy it. I'll buy that to a degree. But what are we going to do if he doesn't win in Cleveland? The Browns organization's terrible too. At what point is it him? We'll find out. We'll cover that, that ground. Jeff, you wanted on that or no?
No, I agree with you. I mean, he's got to show it. I mean, he's got everything you would want in a roster in Cleveland. I mean, he's going to have a great offensive line. He's going to have really good weapons on the outside. He's got an emerging tight end. He's got an all-pro running back with the backup is a former rushing leader, and he's got a Myles Garrett defense with some other nice pieces. I mean, he's never had this much in his life, or at least in the NFL. So yeah, if he loses, it's game over.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about clock management. Stunningly, Jeff Saturday, in his first go-around as an NFL head coach, straight out of the high schools of Georgia, faced with a chance to tie the football game late, had all his timeouts. When the game ended, he had all his timeouts while not converting on fourth down. He had all his timeouts. Now, I could point out that I think the spot was brutal that went into their fourth down because, and Matt Ryan briefly touched on it. He dove. He didn't slide. So it's not where you start to dive. When you go head first, you're open to hits, right? That's how it works. And so they gave him a bad spot. You can't challenge under 2 minutes, so you can't get on him for not challenging, although I might have considered just taking the penalty and the challenge just to stop the clock and make him call the penalty on me and then go at him. But probably not a good plan. But he let all that time come off the clock. And what I think is the bigger issue is that he then walked to the podium and said, no, time wasn't an issue. There were 30 seconds left. You were down by 7. You were still 40-plus yards away. And, your team was running around like a goof fest. And then you actually stood there with a straight face and tried to act like time wasn't it and thought that was going to do it, that would be the end of the conversation. And then the next day immediately came back and said, yeah, I wish I'd taken a timeout. What do you make of what we saw there? And what do you make of, and I will add in, he's done better than I thought he would, right? One win and in the fight for 2 more games. I will already give the man credit. They've been better than I thought he would be. But that's still one of the reasons why you don't put a guy like this in, because they very easily could have been in that game. And if he's making those mistakes, how many other mistakes is he making that maybe don't just explode on the screen like it does in the 2-minute drill, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I give him a lot more credit for what they've done in the 3 games he's coached. But that moment in particular is what happens when you don't have coaching experience at this level. And there are a lot of things that go into that moment. And as much as we want to sit here and act like a lot of these guys have a lot of answers and can figure things out and are ready for every situation, the truth is everybody has to learn on the fly in those kind of moments. And so, and really the important thing to mention there is the slide where the ball is spotted. That affects your play calling, it affects your strategy. And you can get caught, in the moment of not understanding the importance of what those timeouts mean. And think about Nathaniel Hackett, who's been with Matt LaFleur as an offensive coordinator, who's spent a lot of time working on these situations throughout his career, been an offensive coordinator in Jacksonville. Think about how he mismanaged the first game of his career with a field goal. And he had all this time to practice these things. I think part of that is just being human. Part of it is when you fire your offensive coordinator and you have a 30-year-old guy who's working as your offensive coordinator, who's the first person in your ear. There are a lot of people coming at you. And I could see where Jeff Saturday could get lost. And so I think it's the kind of moment you knew was going to happen with him as a head coach of this team. And I think I give him credit for at least acknowledging it the day after it. I'm sure in the moment he's probably pride and ego and whatever else goes into losing the game. But I'm sure he realized, okay, I need more time to make these things work. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to be cautious.
It's always better to be truthful. It's always better to be honest, because you're gonna fry if you sit up there and try to lie to people. That's not going to work, and people are going to find it out. So I will give him credit for that. Eric, better than you thought he'd be, worse than you thought he'd be. How much should this how much should this be a major stumbling block to him continuing in this job in the future?
Oh, he shouldn't have this job in the future. I mean, like he's trying to.
But he shouldn't have had it in the first place. But he's got it now.
He's not getting the interim tag pulled. He's riding out the thing until the end of the year, and then they're going to get not to be crass, but they're going to get a real head coach, right? Like this is to get to the end of the season without having to give anything more to Gus Bradley or give that kind of thing. And to be honest, they performed better than my expectations. They're 2-1 against the spread. They even won a road game his first week. They took an Eagles team that is 10-1 to the wire, and in fact, they had a fourth quarter lead in the game against Pittsburgh. Like they're playing hard. I think putting Matt Ryan back in is probably good insofar as for them to win these games. For them long term, it's stupid, right? Because if Matt Ryan gets hurt, like they got to pay him. I think it's like $7 million come if he's hurt so badly he can't pass a physical next league year. Like they're on the hook for him again for more money. So this doesn't make a ton of sense to me, other than Irsay trying to keep butts in the seats and type of thing. But I think he's overperformed. It's the end of game stuff. It's just he's blowing such a perfect opportunity, right? Because what Jeff said, pride. I think that's a big word here. Like for most coaches, there's an aspect of like, I'm in this job because I'm one of the 32 best men in the world at this. I don't need some nerd telling me how to do end of game stuff. I don't need some blah, blah, blah. And it's like you have, as Jeff Saturday, the unique opportunity of you aren't one of the best 32 men in the world at this. You are a character, and you should be using, like my friend John Park, like that's what he does. Like, like he for the Colts. And like you could be leaning on these people and delegating to them. And if it doesn't work, you also can delegate the blame to those people. Like you are in a perfect position where no one's expecting you to have all the answers, and yet you still try to generate the answers yourself. And to me, that seems like such a waste of an opportunity for somebody like Jeff Saturday. The only way that he was going to shoot the moon and get this job was to do all of the right things.
Yeah. By the way, Jeff, am I the only one that hears Eric say there's no chance he's going to get this job and goes, you seen how the owner operates? Like there's no chance he's going to be made the interim coach. Yeah. He was made the interim coach.
Yeah. He was on the instead of ESPN get up 3 weeks ago.
He went to an ESPN production meeting right before he went to his first NFL meeting as a head coach. You guys think
Irsay's such a cheapskate that he's just going to play out Saturday until the end of Reich's contract? Like, what are we doing here?
Maybe I'm missing something. I don't think this is a money move. I think he likes Jeff Saturday. He wants him to succeed, and rich people think whatever they want, they can make happen. Or is right.
This is going to be an utter and complete disaster for Irsay. And there's got to be somebody smart in Irsay's world that's like, what the hell are you doing?
But is Jeff Saturday done enough that if he went and was an offensive line coach for 2 or 3 years somewhere, could you see him getting a head coaching job now based on what he's doing right now?
Sure.
Yeah. Does anybody know? I thought this one was a good one. Somebody said, does anybody know what his high school record is? Was he any good? Yeah, here it is. Brad put it up there. Best question would be, how was his high school team doing? Was he winning in high school or not? Do we know?
Well, was he coaching it? Was he actually the head coach, or was he just helping out?
I thought
that was never clear to me.
I mean, I never thought it was important enough to really evaluate
Dig into it.
the
All you had to hear was he was coaching in high school.
Yeah.
Didn't matter what he was doing there. That was his resume.
Yeah, I think I think it'd be pretty interesting though to see. Now I'm kind of intrigued. Maybe I'll dig into this. I do like this from Aaron. Aaron said even rich people like the validation of people they think are cool. Okay, I mean that's pretty good. That's I think where he's coming from. Also, I want to point out somebody put up and I posted it. If you catch us on the podcast in the chat room, somebody posted that the new rule is that when the quarterback dives, it is where he takes off on the dive. Is that right? Anybody?
That can't be true because if he dives for the end zone, that's a touchdown, isn't it? Like,
I mean,
I think there is an aspect
that's what I thought too. But
if he turtles, maybe that's a thing. If he gives himself, but if he dives with the ball like this, maybe there's distinctions that we're not aware of.
Yeah, the slide is the only thing where it stops. I don't know. I haven't heard about the dive being brought back to where he starts to dive at.
Yeah, Pig One's adamant. It changed in 18, he said end zone is different.
I do remember there was a game when in the Giants last Super Bowl season where Victor Cruz gave himself up, like laid the ball out, and like the Cardinals were like, oh, that's a fumble. It's like, no, he gave himself up, so he's down. Like, I do think that there is like a little bit of weirdness. I mean, leave it to the NFL to like leave a huge ambiguity with like play officiating wise. But like, I do know there is some ambiguity over like giving yourself up and like simply like sitting there and falling.
A little friend says it's 15 yards from where you turtle. I like that. That's good. That's solid. Buffalo Bills, Jeff. Where do we rank him now? Von Miller's dinged up. He says he's going to try to be out just the one game. First of all, should he even be trying to mess around, on this? Should he just be, well, what's the rush? Or and how much do we ding them now? How much have they fallen as far as where we see them as one of the main contenders?
Well, I think until they get healthy, I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 teams you put above them right now. But it's not just Von Miller. It's, that Thanksgiving Day game, they only had 2 defensive ends available once he got hurt. They've lost Micah Hyde. They've had, different linebackers banged up. Tremaine Edmonds wasn't playing in that game. So they got to get some players back healthy. And they also have lost a couple receivers too that were, as far as depth goes. Jamison Crowder could have been a bigger player for them. But I think the main pieces of what they are still there. I think it's very easy to forget that this team, people thought if they hadn't lost to Kansas City, would have been able to beat the Rams with what they had. A lot of those guys are still there. So, Von Miller, we'll see what happens with him. The kind of injury he's had, as somebody who's had a couple ACL injuries and dealt with this stuff, yeah, you can manage a meniscus. This is more of a swelling, pain management type thing. But I felt like once it wasn't an ACL, he was going to try to play. And I agree with you. Maybe they don't have to rush him. It would not surprise me to see him on some kind of a pitch count for, a few games coming back into it, just to kind of keep him from aggravating something. But ultimately, he's there for the playoffs. And I feel like, and I've said this before, if you want to win a championship, you're going to deal with some hard times. And this is their time to deal with that kind of stuff. And if you're really a championship team, you can work through it. You can get stronger. You can build from that, and you can advance and use that as motivation. And so I saw when they beat the Lions on Thanksgiving, the way they reacted to it, the way Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs reacted, it was almost as if like, oh, God, we got through this. We survived this. That has to be their mentality every game now.
Right.
Like it has to be urgency. It has to be. It's not going to be I think they're realizing that nobody's going to give them this because they're really talented or really deep or they got a great quarterback or Von Miller. They got to earn it every week. And so I still like them, but certainly it's a much tougher road with what they're dealing with.
Yep. And also left tackle Deion Dawkins out as well. And, the schedule, we mentioned, we were talking about it a little bit last night, but you take a look at the war of schedules. I mean, this is a huge week in the AFC with a lot of the big boys squaring off either against each other or other top NFC teams. And the Bills playing at New England, right? Like, I don't think anybody thinks the Pats are world beaters anymore, but nobody wants to see Bill Belichick on a day you're dinged up and got issues, right? So what do you think? Where do they sit now as contenders in your mind, the Bills, Eric?
I think they're tied with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think, you look at the past of Super Bowl winners in this league, right? The Rams at this time last year were going through like a 3-loss and 4-game stretch, right? In 2020, you had Tampa went into their bye at 7-5 and were struggling and kind of like percolating under the surface. The Chiefs in 2019 were 6-4 and kind of percolate. Like where you don't want to be in the NFL right now is peaking too early. I think of the Dolphins and the Niners as teams that are kind of peaking right now, and possibly Kansas City. But so I think the Bills are going through a stretch right now, but I still think once we get to playoff time, they'll be in a position where I think that they'll be still a solid bet to win the Super Bowl. Maybe not like as head and shoulders above the Chiefs the way they were at the beginning of the year, but very much a in that equivalence class.
Yeah, I love the Bills' talent, but if Josh Allen is not going to be able to pull him out of the fire late, and now they start to take on waters, I think that the betting line I think is right in this one. I wanted to be able to say, not as a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs, but that none of the Bills this is just an overreaction to it. But I think with some of the injuries coming on, Von Miller's big. I mean that's a big one. And we've had some people in the chat room saying, "Hey, people in Buffalo are saying he's out longer than that. He's not going to be out for just one game. This is a smokescreen." And we know teams will do that to try to get you to prepare for multiple different looks and play games with the injuries. So we'll see how it goes in the long run. Let's talk about Odell Beckham Jr. The Bills are one of the places he could land, Jeff, and Von Miller supposedly trying to woo him there. They were teammates with the Rams last year after Von Miller got traded over there. Where's the best spot for him? Is it the Bills? Is it the Cowboys? Jerry Jones just pretty much openly talks about it. He immediately said, no, get taken off the plane. Don't bother us. As well.
Yeah, I still think Dallas is the front runner. I don't see where the Giants make sense. I mean, one, he's been there. Two, what they have on offense, the quarterback is not the offense they're running does not suit what he does. And so you're just asking for the same situation he had 5 years ago or 6 years ago to play out again, in New York. So I know it sounds great, and I'm sure it's partly marketing and trying to keep his the bidding going up for him. But I really feel like this is between Buffalo and it's between Dallas. Dallas has all the sex appeal. It has certainly they've made the overtures very public and very relentless. And so that's got to be exciting for him. I think the only reason Buffalo would make sense, which is the complete opposite of what Dallas offers, is because of Von Miller and because of Josh Allen and because of where they stand in the AFC power structure. Like he and Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis would be a pretty formidable package if he actually can play, which again is I always say this with him. Don't know if the guy can play right now. Don't know if he's going to walk in here and just be limping around in half of what he was, or if he can actually contribute. So I think that's part of his calculus too. Like, where can I go, get a great deal, and not have to be as much of a savior as I was in LA, where people forget this too. Robert Woods got hurt, which is why he played so much there. I think Dallas is going to end up being where he winds up.
I think Dallas will do it as well. And I think the Bills ought to get out of this sweepstakes. I mean, just have your team, Eric.
Yeah.
Why do they feel a need to try to tape something on here midstream?
Yeah, it's weird. I think it's very much going to be something where, it's a team that has like an unforeseen injury like the Rams with Robert Woods. And right now, Buffalo, a team like that, doesn't really have that unforeseen. I mean, Gabe Davis is kind of who we thought he would be, right? And Diggs is still amazing. Dawson Knox hasn't been as good as we thought he'd be. He was great against the Chiefs. But yeah, so I think if for Odell, it's going to be a team that that comes out of the blue like the Rams last year.
Yeah. So which would be who would you take a shot at saying it'd be?
I don't know. I mean, it could be like it's hard to predict injuries, but like you think about somebody like the Dolphins, if Waddle or Hill were to get hurt, and how much that offense depends upon having two great wide receivers, like that would be one, for example. Dallas is an interesting one because you saw it on Thanksgiving. Michael Gallup is emerging as a really good option next to CeeDee Lamb. do they even need him? Right? Like, it was supposed to be Dalton Schultz and how good he was the other day. Like, does that offense even need a disruption? Maybe it's somebody like Minnesota. Minnesota doesn't have the money. Like, so it's one of those contending teams. I think that if you see something unforeseen, maybe if Philadelphia loses, Devontae Smith or AJ Brown to injury or something like that, he goes in there. Like, I don't know if there's one team right now where like you look at it and say that team needs Odell to actually win a Super Bowl. Like, I actually think he's played it. It's probably New York, but New York's not good enough. Like, New York isn't good enough to have him come in. Like, that team's so bad. I think, and I think that Joe Shane is a sharp guy. I think Joe Shane's not going to like jeopardize kind of like future money just to come in and win 8 games, 8-9. Like, I think he knows that like the first 7 wins were an issue. The Ravens could be one. I mean, look, Lamar's played really good games the last 2 weeks and they haven't capitalized because the receivers suck.
I'll say this. I don't see this one happening. Gary says, I'm surprised OBJ Titans isn't a thing. What about Mike Vrabel? And where Mike Vrabel's come from says he wants to bring that into the middle. They traded away AJ Brown.
Yeah.
Now, if he comes on the cheap, but does anybody think like I think that's the wild card in this? Like, do you think he's trying to win a championship? He got the ring last year, even though he didn't finish the game on his feet in getting the ring, but he got the ring last year. So I think money's going to be the incentive, and who knows which owner might say, okay, let's splash the most cash around. Let's get this thing going here. And does somebody like the Denver Broncos say, we'll give you 3 years right now, like, and give him more money over the top, more guaranteed money, and make the move now saying, well, we can try to win a bidding war this offseason, or we can just make sure we get him right now. You mentioned, coming out of the blue, Eric. I think that would be the out of the blue offer, the one that gives him more total dollars and more security. And I think that's what he'd take. I think money's going to end up being the one that ends up getting it done for him.
Yeah, but the Broncos just signed Tim Patrick to a deal, and like he's coming back. Like, it's sort of this weird thing where like wide receivers in the draft have never been more high impact at the very beginning. Like, he's kind of screwed, honestly. Like, it's not.
Oh yeah. Like, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I think the money he wants, like even a team like Tampa, could be a player in this because of Tom Brady and the name value there. But I agree. The money is going to drive it, and if you're a contender right now, who out there says it looks to you like somebody who wants to spend that kind of money for Odell Beckham? I just don't see that making a ton of sense outside of Dallas or Buffalo, the teams he's talking to.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, is Mike White the real deal with the Jets, Jeff?
He's real enough. I don't know if he's the real deal. I don't know if it's going to last for the next 6 weeks, but watching that game, I mean, it was Zach Wilson has not played that well probably in his entire career with the Jets. And there was a sharpness to it. There was a confidence in the team around him. I'm a big fan of when you quarterbacks step into the lineup. Like, how does the team look when they're with him? And people around New York were saying that locker room likes Mike White a lot. And that's how it looked on the field. Like, they like him a lot. They play for him. Zach Wilson, there's a lot of things going on with him fundamentally. I know people have told me that, coming out of college, there were concerns about his personality, about the arrogance, about some of the fundamentals. That stuff is showing up now. And again, having been around that team earlier this year and the optimism there, they know what's at stake. They see how the AFC East is shaping up. They know Buffalo is the dominant team. The Dolphins have taken a huge step forward. The Patriots are always going to be dangerous. If they're going to be a player in this, they got to get something fixed under center. And right now, Mike White has shown that Zach Wilson needs to stay on the sidelines for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to move on now, right, Eric? I mean, when the kid comes out and just immediately hits Garrett Wilson for a couple of touchdowns, gets him going down the field. They've got the defense, the receivers. You could tell they didn't flat out be like, yeah, this has been long overdue. But everybody certainly had a pep in their step in the post-game interviews. If you watched any of that, after that game Sunday.
Yeah, I think with Zach Wilson, it's kind of the end of it for you. Somebody said, Herbert is Jay Cutler with a better attitude. Zach Wilson is Jay Cutler without the talent. And unfortunately, I feel like it's just so hard. Like, we've all played sports, like you've coached sports, Soren. Like, it's when the huddle doesn't believe in the leader of the team, it's just so hard to win. And I feel like it's also, it's not that high of a bar, but if you can't like I think that there are quarterbacks in the league, like Matt Ryan, for example, like Thomas Dimitrov, my co-host on the Sumer Sports Show, always talks about Matt was an incremental leader. He got better at leading over time. And like, I don't think any of us would say, oh, this is an alpha guy, right? But over time, like, he cleared the bar of leadership. Like, I think most NFL players are like, look, this guy doesn't have it in him to be like a super vocal guy, but he leads in other ways. For you to be so bad at leadership that players are like going against you. Like, look at the Minnesota Vikings, the team that the Jets play this week. They want so badly for Kirk Cousins to lead that team that they're putting stupid chains around him. They're getting him one of those grills for his teeth. Like, they want him to step up and be leader. And to Kirk's credit, he's at least leaning into it a little bit. He's trying. Zach Wilson didn't even freaking try, right? So to Jeff's point, if Mike White's going to go in there and hit the check down, Zach Wilson's time to throw over 3 seconds. Mike White's time to throw like 2.5, 2.6. Like, if he's just going to go in and hit the open guy and hit the check down and not be a complete dolt in the huddle, like, of course they're going to rally around him. It's trivial.
Yeah, I will say this, and this is one that I've had for a while. Brett says it was a rally around the backup quarterback game. And I've said it for a long time. Good football teams will rally around the backup quarterback for one game, like from a gambling perspective. Now, generally we're talking about an injury, though, right? And it's like, hey, the big guy's down. We all got to be at our best. Let's step it up. Let's play at a high level. This isn't an injury, right? This is a benching, but it's almost like they're curing a mental injury based upon how the reaction was with everything around it. But I do think it's something to watch. Like, don't wave the checkered flag because one time everybody rose to the occasion around him. There's still work to be done. And listen, the Jets are at Minnesota this week. They got a good team. Somebody to prove against at Buffalo the next week. So, we're going to find out real quick what he is when it's all said and done. Russell Wilson got blown up by Mike Purcell on the sidelines and then tried to give his BS answer, Jeff, that, oh, no, he said, let's go. And I'm all with him. I mean, that didn't look like a guy looking at Russell Wilson and saying, let's go. I wasn't there. I didn't hear it. I'm not calling the man a liar. I'm just saying it sure didn't look like the way Russell Wilson described it. Is that the last straw when it gets to that point?
I wouldn't say it's the last straw, but it certainly was revelatory. I mean, you looked at that, and that's a lot. I'm sure there are a lot of people in that locker room who want to do that, not just to Russell Wilson, but to the head coach. And that's just how it played. A lot of high hopes for this team coming into the year. And, there's a lot of stuff that comes with Russ that doesn't get discussed publicly. And I know that, Kyle Brandt on Good Morning Football took some shots at him. But, when I was out there actually going back to Seattle, I remember Warren Moon talking about Russell back when he was in Seattle. And Russ, in those days, he was really close to Pete Carroll when he was a young player, really close to the front office. And Warren used to tell him, look, man, Russ, the guys in the locker room got to know who you are, too. You can't just always be with the coaches upstairs talking about stuff. These guys got to see you. And to the leadership point, that's something that I think he won over that team because of his work ethic and his will to do whatever it took to win games. And so when he got to Denver, he's with Sierra now. She has to have a certain number of parking spaces in the parking lot. You got private security. He's got
his own office.
He's got his own office. So people remember that stuff. It's great when you're winning, but when you're losing, that defines you more than anything. And so I think that's a big part of what's happening here is that he brought that drama with him, that ego, and I wouldn't say it's a circus, it's his life, but it's a lot. And so when you're trying to win football games and that's who your quarterback is, rings don't matter anymore. Let's ride doesn't matter anymore. They just see a lot of fluff, a lot of style and not much substance.
Is this it? Eric? Is it going to be a one and done? Are they going to? Is this going to be like Randy Moss to the Raiders, and it's like you paid big bucks for him, but now you turn around and sell him for 20 cents on the dollar someplace else, and maybe he does or doesn't rise again the way Randy Moss did with the Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Clark of the Ringer said, "Well, look, on the bright side, he's only going to cost them $30 million dead cap in 2026." It's like they're stuck with him, and I think that there's a non-trivial chance that he emerges and becomes at least an average or above average quarterback again. But it's really, and I think what Jeff said is really, really smart. It's like it's a lot, like the whole method acting and the whole dapping people who don't exist and like all this stuff. It's just like there are people who are far less talented on that team that have to give everything they have to be an average player, and they look at Russell Wilson and they think you're expending a lot of effort to suck, right? And so like I think that there's just an eye roll, and they probably have to go through a lot. Like probably has to be a coaching change. It probably has to be a overhaul of some of the players on the roster. It has to be the ownership and the new coach going to players like Cortland Sutton, then going to players like Randy Gregory and Patrick Sin, and look, Russ is our quarterback. You got to live with him, right? The same way that the Vikings did with Kirk, this past year, like with the quarterback that had soured on some of his teammates and stuff. It's like that has to be done because there is no getting out from this Russell Wilson deal for a few years, right? And so the only solution is to get, and maybe he's hurt, and maybe you sit him down and say, look, you've been terrible this year. We're going to sit you down. We're going to make excuses for you. And next year you have to come back and be the exact opposite of who you were this year, both on the field and off. Because like, I mean, I've seen it like when the Packers traded Brett Favre to the Jets, Brett Favre had his own office. He was reclusive. He didn't want to be there. And it worked okay at the beginning. And then that team faded down the stretch. And when Eric Mangini Eric Mangini got fired and Brett Favre retired, no one on the Jets was like, oh, I wish Brett Favre would come back. Like they wanted him out. And then when he went to Minnesota, he was like, my boy Percy. Like he was the old G shucks teammate again, and they won all the games. And then the next year, when he didn't want to come back, and Longwell and all those guys dragged his ass back to Minneapolis, they went 6-10. Like these things can change in a year. And I think for Wilson, it's just got to be like, look, guys, I messed up. I got lost in the sauce, and it's time to reevaluate. But they're not getting rid of Wilson this year. It's just infeasible.
Let's hit a couple real quick here. First of all, Rodgers and Brady. Do you see guys that want to keep playing football? I thought it was kind of telling when Aaron Rodgers like, well, if they want to sit me for the rest of the year, that's fine. I mean, that most guys would be like, I'm not sitting. Like they'll do anything to play. They love playing the game. And I think Aaron Rodgers has loved playing the game, but it sure as hell doesn't look like he does anymore. What happens with these two guys? What's your feeling? Your gut feeling telling you right now, Jeff?
I think Brady's done. People have speculated would he go someplace else and try to, all the Miami rumors of last year. That's obviously not an option now with the way Tua was played. But I just think that he's, he got himself into a situation that he couldn't see coming. And I think now he realizes how they'll probably make the playoffs and win that division, but this is not how he wants to play football or have his career play out. And he's old enough to know, all right, maybe it is time to walk away. Rodgers is a lot more interesting and a lot more intriguing. And the more he talks, the more it sounds like he's starting to lose a lot of interest in being around football because he's just not around it that much anymore. He's not there in the offseason. He doesn't want to put in the time with the receivers. He's spending more time talking to Pat McAfee than he does talking to his own press corps. And so it just feels as if he's had a great ride, but I don't think he wants to sit around. And I think he recognizes, or we all recognize, maybe this team, they had their chance. They had their 3 years of 13 wins, NFC championship games, not getting over the hump. And when you get to this place that they're at right now, with the money they got, invested in him, with the injuries they have, with some of the struggles, it could easily be this way next year. And Aaron Rodgers is smart enough to see that as well. So it would not surprise me if he had a long discussion with himself about what he wants, or if there was some shopping going on, like with Russell Wilson.
At 4-8, I've got to believe the click numbers on the Pat McAfee spots are really eroding. And I think if he sits down, they're really going to erode, to which you might make you think, okay, that's going to put him in retirement. But it might be the wake-up call that you only matter when you play and you play well. So I love what you said, Jeff, about that. But I think that's a sword that could cut both ways. Maybe that is the motivator. We saw bad Aaron Rodgers, which was still pretty good for most. And then all of a sudden he got back to being MVP caliber Aaron Rodgers. You mentioned, like, sometimes there's a bad season, you come back. Eric, is this a bad season and he comes back, or do you see a guy that's cashed?
I think he's done, man. He's got you saw some of it on Sunday night, right? He still has a good arm. He can still move around a little bit. So many body language things makes me look like he's toast. And then, like, you look, and the contrast between him and Jordan Love was immense, right? Rodgers was once a player who, from a physical standpoint, was the best we've ever seen at the position. Arm strength, movement, being able to throw without a platform, all that stuff. And, even though you saw some glimpses of it Sunday night, when Jordan Love went in the game, my guy was slinging it and moving around, and the offense just looked crisp. And it's just like, he's done, right? I think there's a chance he gets it back, but it takes a lot, right? And I think you're seeing that with Brady, to Jeff's point. Like, it just takes a lot to be that obsessed and that good. And, when Brady never had, like, the greatest physical skills, so he had to be, like, doing those stupid little twists all off season. And, like, when he takes a month off, it's like, well, because, like, people talk about the game against the Bucks, and people are like, game against the Browns. People are like, well, why, that was like the worst called game I've ever seen out of Leftwich and Bowles. And it's like, Brady in the past was overriding the coaches, right? Like, he's management. This year, he just looks like an employee. And, like, I just think once that's the case for both those men, it's over.
I always like to be proactive. Let's call our shot here. The Miami Dolphins right now are at 8-3. That's tied with the Bills for the second best record in the AFC. But they're getting ready to go to San Francisco, to the Chargers, and to the Buffalo Bills, right? So after those three games, Jeff, what are we saying about the Miami Dolphins?
Not as good as we thought. I think you're taking 2 L's in there somehow. I can't tell you who's going to give them to them, but I think they're going to drop 2 games, and all this talk about them surpassing the Bills in the AFC East is going to go away. I mean, they don't play good enough defense right now to deal with the Niners offense with all those weapons, Justin Herbert and Josh Allen. I think they could be easily not blown out, but they're going to take some tough losses in that stretch.
Yeah, I mean, we could be saying if they go 2-1, Eric, holy cow, this is the best team in the AFC. If they can come through that, maybe they don't get to the best record, but if it's a salty loss, at Buffalo, or at San Francisco, and then they win at the Chargers and at the Bills, they're going to be sticking their flag in the ground and saying, well, we may not be the number 1 seed, but don't any of you want to see us coming through town?
I agree. 3 games on the road too. Like, to me, I think that's the biggest one, where you get the 3 consecutive, over the course of the past few weeks, you've had a bad Texans team, a bad Browns team, a bad Bears team, a really, really good Detroit Lions team. That was a good battle by them. They got behind 14-0 in that game and came back and battled. But, like, they haven't played a defense of the Niners caliber in a long time, right? And maybe the Steelers are kind of, they can see it from their house, and they were not good in that game. They had 1 offensive touchdown. So it's a test. And the Chargers don't have a great defense, but they have a great offense. And, obviously the Bills are good all around. Like, I would not be surprised if we saw 0-3. I also wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if we saw 2-1. McDaniel looks like a great coach. Like, when you look at how he interacts with Tua, he just looks like a guy that you want to play for. Like, he had the whole thing where he went up to Alex Engel and he was like, by the way, that play where that guy tried to tackle you and you made it so that he couldn't tackle you, I like that. And he gave him a fist bump. I'm like, that's kind of like I honestly want to root for the guy after watching how he interacts with his players. But how much of that is buoying an average team and making them just above average, and how much of that is taking an above average team and making them great? And I think it's probably the former and not the latter, in which case they're going to struggle over the next month.
All right, let's wrap with this. What are you looking at, Jeff? We got a week. We got a lot of really good games. Anyone who's still alive in the survivor pools, God bless you. I mean, have fun with this week because big boys are facing big boys all over the place. Is there a game, a matchup, any storyline that you're really watching? You're going to be in Cincinnati, by the way,
Yeah.
watching that game with the Bengals and the Chiefs. What are you looking at? Is that it? Is that? I mean, obviously.
That's high on the list, but the one we just talked about, Dolphins Niners, is to me is the most intriguing, just because I think it's for both teams. It's a huge statement game. We're going to see where the Niners are at. They've had a nice run here, have a chance to take the NFC West, get control of it, a chokehold on it, and again, the Dolphins are going to. This is their moment of truth, as I wrote earlier this week for our website. So I want to see what happens in that game.
Yeah, that's a big one. Eric, can I try to call your shot?
What game do you think?
Your two upstart playoff predictions are going head to head.
Damn it! So good, Petro.
Gary Hamilton. Is that like is Petro with Gary Hamilton? Was that like an alias for you?
No, it's not. But,
I thought it was more complex than that, Petro, but you nailed it. I'm so excited because look, Jacksonville has the best point differential in the AFC South. They have one of the better net success rates in the league, play for play. They finally get a win. They finally have two close wins over the past few games, one against Vegas, one against the Ravens. They go to Detroit. Look, Detroit proved on Thanksgiving that they're a good team. The record might not reflect that, but they can play with anybody, and they're a good football team. Money is coming in on the Jags. They are favored in this game. I think Detroit upsets the Jags, and I think the roar is going to be restored in that game. But obviously, the best games of the weekend, I like Jets-Vikings. I think the Vikings show that they're better than the Jets in that game as well. Eagles-Titans is going to be amazing. That's a low-key one that would be one of the best games of the weekend if it wasn't for like Bengals-Chiefs and so on. It's going to be a great weekend of football, but the underrated game that I will be looking at while Jeff and I have tacos downtown in Cincinnati is his Lions versus the Jags.
I'm glad he's taking you for tacos, Jeff, because I hear tacos in December in Cincinnati. I mean, you just can't beat it. You don't go to San Diego. You don't go to Texas for tacos.
Well, I'm not taking him to Skyline Chili, for God's sakes. Like I have too much. I like Jeff way too much for that.
I'll eat Mexican food anywhere. I don't care. I think it's a great idea to go for tacos. All right, listen, there's a number of them we've kind of hit on, so with some of the other storylines that are there that, are some of the games you could want with the Browns game with the return of Deshaun Watson. But I'm going to go with Jets Vikings because I do think both those teams have earned themselves some pretty good records, but I don't think anybody's really buying them. Right. And this would be the ultimate, would it not? If Mike White vanquishes Kirk Cousins, Eric, would you? I mean, your timeline on your Twitter would just blow up, and I can only imagine the things that you'll be firing out there. But if Mike White, who I agree, the rally around the backup quarterback for one game and one game only is usually my theory, but I don't know that he's the backup quarterback. I think he's the starting quarterback that's finally been given his due. Right, the rightful king is back to take the throne. And I think this team may play around him a little bit better. I think the Jets, I take him a lot more serious with Mike White than I do with him. But the Vikings got a little something to prove here. I kind of like the Jets-Vikings game. I like interconference games because a lot of times they'll let it all hang out. And I think both these quarterbacks have a little something to prove. So
yeah.
I like
Kirk
that.
played his best game on Thursday, Thanksgiving. I think, if he plays back to like this season average, the Jets will be salty in that game.
Listen, we love doing the podcast, and we hope you will help support our sponsors. Of course, the 2D podcast proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete. You can find them online at ganasphalt.com. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Again, you can find them online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. They are a full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Anything parking, any problems with a parking lot, whether it's building it or repairing any part of it, striping, everything, they do it all, asphalt and concrete. disappearing parking lot problem since 1994. It's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. See them online at gannasphalt.com. We would encourage you to go there. If you got a business, you got any kind of parking issues, they will take care of it for you. And of course, we look forward to coming back at you next week. Remember, if you're catching us on the podcast, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that love button. Don't cost you nothing, but it does a lot for us. So we would appreciate it if you would hit that button as many times as you can. Get your friends to check out the podcast if they're football fans, because we love doing it. So for Jeff Chadiha for the NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager, Sumer Sports, SumerSports.com. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810. WHB in Kansas City, 810 WHB is where you can, 810WHB.com is where you can catch my radio show. We will be back at it next Wednesday on 2 Deep, 9 p. Central. Until then, thanks for joining us.